In the heyday of Hollywood, the 1930s, the major film studios released more than 500 movies a year to the depression-weary public. But this studio system was a veritable factory. Most films were shot quickly on huge indoor sound stages and back lots.
In the early days of Hollywood, it was the fashion to photograph an entire film within the walls of the studio. And so the special effects or visual artist was called upon to produce backgrounds, to produce the big shot, the panoramic view that would introduce a sequence.
Dr. Raymond Fielding is Dean of the Film School at Florida State University. His book, The Technique of Special Effects Cinematography, has been a definitive text on visual effects for more than 30 years.
A ship foundering at sea, ancient Rome, Pompeii under the explosion of a volcano. How could we possibly go back in time and photograph these? How could we possibly afford the expense of sinking a real ship at sea? For all of these reasons, the work of the visual effects magician is crucial. One thinks of the work of Fred Surson, who was a Czechoslovakian-born filmmaker who was hired by William Fox back in the silent days of filmmaking around 1918 or so, and who rose through the ranks over the years to become head of all special effects at 20th Century Fox, and who during the 1930s produced exquisite, simply marvelous work. The Rains Came and Suez, and one of my favorites, a film called In Old Chicago.
Filmed on the Fox lot during the summer of 1937, In Old Chicago features a stunning recreation of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. This massive conflagration was the work of Fred Surson and his effects team.
The most spectacular shot in the sequence is that long shot of Chicagoans heading for the water with the buildings burning behind. He not only achieved this spectacularly, but saved 20th Century Fox a good deal of money by using the same group of extras, perhaps about 200 of them, over and over in different parts of the image. First, he photographed them on the left-hand side of the screen. Then he photographed them on the right side of the screen, the same extras, but performing somewhat different movements. And finally, he shot them again in the middle of the screen, this time with horses and wagons.
When the scene is put together with miniature buildings and fire elements, the original group of extras has been multiplied threefold, and the result is a heart-pounding finale. Old Chicago seems to expire in flames right before our eyes. Fred Surson received the ultimate compliment for his artistry when, in 1939, his work on The Rains Came was recognized with an Academy Award. This was the very first Oscar ever awarded for Best Special Effects. Panoramic shots are important for historical tales, but they are equally necessary when the story takes place in the distant future. In 1976, film audiences were taken to a domed city where nobody lived beyond the age of 30. Logan's Run tells the story of two people, played by Michael York and Jenny Agutter, who escape this closed society and journey out into the real world. Here they discover a deserted Washington, D.C.
What do you suppose happened to all the people?
I must have left here. Long time ago.
This vision of the abandoned capital would not have been possible without the talents of one of Hollywood's most renowned effects artists.
You have a feel for painting that way. Some people do watercolors real good, some are great portrait painters, but in matte shots, I could tell just by painting and knowing that that'll work and that might not work.
Matthew Urasich, who began creating breathtaking establishing shots in 1950, has contributed to such classics as Ben-Hur, Mutiny on the Bounty, North by Northwest, and The Towering Inferno. Urasich has imagined vistas that push the boundaries of cinematic storytelling. For Logan's Run, he had to visualize the U.S. Capitol's most familiar landmarks in future decay. Most of the live action was shot on the old MGM backlot in Culver City, California. After the actors were photographed, Matthew painted the environment around them. He chose overgrown ivy as a visual representation of the years of neglect.
To get life into the painting, you have to be kind of loose with your painting technique, but still controlled, impressionistic in a sense. The brushstrokes are almost evident. If I painted that realistically, it would have looked just like a slick painting. Whereas all this just wiggly stuff and everything just tied together. That's why when you paint, you have to stand up so you can back away. What you're doing is you're looking with the lens of the camera, because that's what you're painting for, that distance.
One of Matthew's favorite shots in Logan's Run depicts the abandoned Lincoln Memorial. York and Aguirre were shot on an empty soundstage, and Urasich had to paint an imaginary view looking down on them from behind Lincoln's shoulder.
I've never seen a face like that before. That must be the look of being old.
Matthew Urasich brought his imaginative artistry to many other science fiction films. He helped the mothership land in Close Encounters of the Third Kind and visualized an urban nightmare for Blade Runner. But for Logan's Run, he turned a Hollywood backlot into a 21st century Washington, D.C. This stands as one of Urasich's career highlights, for which he was honored with an Academy Award. Coming up next, effects artists transport the shadow to a